Silence has power, not the passive kind, not the kind that hides in fear, but the kind that builds in the dark. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself because it already knows what it's becoming. The kind of silence that shakes the ground, not with noise, but with results. You don't need to tell anyone what you're doing, because if you're truly building something that matters, the work will speak long before your words ever do. We live in a world obsessed with the announcement, a world that rewards the preview more than the product, where everyone's showing their plans, flaunting their moves, rehearsing their greatness before they've lived it. But here's the truth. Real power doesn't announce. Real power arrives. And when it does, it doesn't need applause. It doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need permission. It just walks in, fully formed, fully focused, and undeniable. That's the power of secrecy. Not because you're hiding, but because you're honoring your process. Because some things can't grow in the open. Some dreams are too sacred for noise. Some visions are too powerful to be exposed before they're ready. You don't plant a seed and scream to the soil, "Look what I'm doing." You water it. You protect it. You wait. You trust. Because the moment you expose what hasn't yet rooted you, invite judgment, you invite doubt, you invite energy that doesn't belong in the soil of your future. And that's where most people lose. They talk too soon. They share too wide. They open their vision to spectators who haven't earned the right to see it. And then they wonder why the fire goes out. It's because you gave your flame to a crowd that doesn't know how to hold fire. Understand this. Not everyone deserves access to your becoming. Not everyone should have a seat at your transformation, because people project their limits. They will tell you to be realistic, not because your dream is too big, but because their courage is too small. They will question your silence, not because they care, but because they're uncomfortable with anyone who moves without needing validation. But you don't need their noise. You need discipline. You need solitude. You need to build in quiet where the roots grow deep, where the pressure sharpens you, where the foundation becomes unshakable. The greatest moves you will ever make won't be broadcast. They'll be built. They'll be the hours no one saw, the mornings you rose before the world, the nights you stayed up when everyone else slept, the sacrifices you made that don't make sense to anyone but you. That's the truth of mastery. You master in the shadows. You don't need an audience for your progress. You need a mirror and a reason. And if your reason is real, if your why burns hot enough, you won't need anyone else to believe in you, because your belief will be enough. Your discipline will be enough. Your results will be louder than their opinions ever were. So don't talk. Train. Don't post. Plan. Don't explain. Execute. Because one day, the silence you protected will become the success they can't ignore. And when they ask, "How did you do it?" you'll simply say, "I was working while you were watching." That's the power of not telling anyone what you're doing. You move in stillness. You build in shadows. And then you arrive, unapologetic, unannounced, unstoppable. You arrive not to prove, but to demonstrate. Not to impress, but to embody. You didn't come to say, "Look at me." You came to become so complete, so dialed in, so immovable in your mission that they feel it when you walk into a room. Without a word. That's presence. And presence is earned in the places where no one claps. The gym with no cameras. The desk with no praise. The grind with no guarantee. The early mornings where the only witness to your greatness is discipline itself. That's why you don't speak too soon. Because you know real transformation is fragile at first. It's clay. It's tender. It's sacred. You don't pull it out and wave it around. You mold it. You shape it. You respect it. But most people don't get that. They confuse attention with achievement. They confuse noise with momentum. They confuse exposure with evolution. And so they talk. They declare. They make promises their habits can't support. And then they disappear, not because they lack talent, but because they had no foundation. You won't be that person because you understand the value of what you're carrying. You're not here for claps. You're here for conquest. You're not here to be noticed. You're here to be necessary. And necessity doesn't shout. It shows up. You become undeniable by becoming disciplined, not dramatic, not performative, disciplined every day. When no one sees, when the fire dims, when the progress is invisible, when the results are still underground, that's when you become what others only pretend to be. Because while they're trying to look like it, you're becoming it. And when it's ready, when the roots are deep and the weight of your work is strong enough to hold the spotlight, then, and only then, the world will see. But even then, it's not about the world. Because by the time they see it, you won't need them to. You won't need their validation because your life will already be the evidence. That's the difference. That's why you keep it to yourself. Not because you're hiding, but because you're honoring. Because you know if you have to announce it, you haven't mastered it. And when you've truly mastered it, you won't have to say a word. Your life will speak for you. Because when your life speaks for you, it speaks in a language louder than ambition. It speaks in results, in rhythm, in consistency, in presence, in the way you carry yourself without needing to explain yourself, in the way you show up without warning, and still shift the atmosphere just by being rooted in your own truth. You don't walk into a room looking for attention, you command it. Not because you asked for it, but because you earned it in silence. That's the difference between noise and power. Noise demands to be heard. Power makes itself felt. You don't tell anyone what you're doing because it's not their business. It's your becoming. And becoming is personal. Becoming is messy. Becoming is between you and the divine, between you and your discipline, between you and every moment you chose not to quit when it would have been easier to walk away. Every breakthrough you'll ever experience begins in silence. It starts with a private decision, a private moment, a private vow to yourself that says, no matter what, I'm going to see this through. And in that moment, you stop performing. You stop begging. You stop asking for applause. You start building in stillness, in shadows, because you know the truth. What is birthed in the dark has the power to withstand the light. So don't tell them. Show them by not showing them. Show them by disappearing into your purpose. Show them by saying less and doing more. Show them by becoming so focused, so self-governed, so obsessed with excellence that you make success a byproduct of who you are, not something you have to chase. Let them wonder what you're up to. Let them guess. Let the silence drive them crazy while your actions drive you forward. Because while they talk, you're training. While they plan, you're executing. While they watch the clock, you're building the future. And when it's done, when you're standing in the middle of everything you once had to fight to believe in, you'll smile not because they finally see it, but because you always did. That's why you never needed to tell anyone. Because the one person who needed to know you never forgot. And that's what separates the few who finish from the many who fade. They talked about it. You became it. They sought approval. You sought alignment. They asked, do you think I can do this? You declared, I already am. You didn't need to post it. You didn't need to market your moves. Because when you're locked in, when the fire is internal, when the mission is sacred, you're too busy doing the work to talk about the work. That's how you rise. That's how you break patterns and rewrite bloodlines. That's how you step into rooms they said you didn't belong in. Not because you announced yourself, but because you earned it in silence. Understand this. The ones who really have it, the real power, the real peace, the real results, they don't need to convince anyone. They walk in truth. They move in purpose. And they don't flinch. Because they've seen what happens when you build without broadcasting. They've tasted the kind of confidence that doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being loyal to the vision, even when no one's clapping. So keep it sacred. Keep it quiet. Keep it burning. Let your discipline be your defense. Let your consistency be your answer. Let your legacy be your voice. Because the most dangerous person in the room is not the loudest. It's the one who says nothing and still can't be ignored. You don't need the spotlight. You are the source. And if you stay steady, if you protect your fire, the day will come when the world asks how you did it. You won't need to say a thing, because by then, they'll already know. And that's the beauty of it. The quiet ones are the ones who shake the ground. They're not loud because they don't have to be. They're not flashy because they are the light. They don't post their path because they live it. And they don't ask for support because they've already built their foundation from within. You've been told you need to share everything, that you need to show your process, that you need to explain, to prove, to document every step. But hear this. Some things only grow in sacredness. Some things only survive in silence. And your dream, your becoming, might be one of them. So protect it, not because you're afraid, but because it's not ready to be touched by the world. Not yet. There's a strength in building quietly. There's a wisdom in restraint. There's a force in patience that the noisy world will never understand. Let them chase clout. You chase clarity. Let them flex. You forge. Let them burn fast. You build slow, because the fire that burns slow lasts. And when you've done the work, when the habits are locked in, when the mindset is rewired, when the silence has turned into structure, you won't need to launch anything. You will be the launch. People will feel it. Doors will open. Alignment will find you. Not because you talked your way in, but because your energy spoke before you did. That's what happens when you choose to stay silent and build anyway. That's what happens when you stop trying to be seen and start seeing yourself. You become undeniable, unshakable, unstoppable, and completely untouchable by the opinions that once kept you small. Because now, you don't just believe, you know. And that knowing, it's louder than any announcement you'll ever make. Because once you know, deeply, unshakably, without needing anyone else to echo it, you're free. Free from needing to explain your ambition. Free from shrinking your vision to fit someone else's comfort zone. Free from asking, do you think I can? And instead declaring, watch me. And when you reach that level of inner certainty, everything changes. You stop leaking energy into conversations that don't build you. You stop entertaining doubt disguised as advice. You stop opening your sacred plans to unqualified opinions. Because now you've learned not everyone is meant to be in your workshop. Not everyone is worthy of witnessing your blueprint. Some people only come to poke holes in your foundation. Others will cheer for you too soon, and their celebration will steal the hunger that built your discipline. And just a few will try to take what you haven't even finished creating. That's why silence isn't cowardice. It's strategy. It's protection. It's power. The more you withhold, the more you wield. The less they know, the more you grow. Because while they're busy reacting to noise, you're responding to purpose. While they're obsessing over attention, you're focused on ascension. They flash. You forge. And what you forge in silence becomes indestructible. Because there's no weak point for critics to attack. No open wound from premature exposure. Only you. Solid. Steady. Silent. And when the time comes, when it's finished, when it's undeniable, you won't need to say a word. They'll feel it. In your posture. In your peace. In your results. Because nothing speaks louder than a life that was built instead of broadcasted. That's the kind of life you're crafting, not a spectacle, but a standard. Not a performance, but a presence. A presence that says, I did this. I earned this. I became this in silence, in sacrifice, in solitude. While the world slept, I sharpened. While they watched each other, I watched myself. And that's where greatness is born. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Not in applause, but in alignment. Because the truth is, if you can be built by praise, you can be broken by criticism. But if you build yourself in silence, you become immune to both. You become dangerous not to people, but to patterns. The patterns that kept you small. The patterns that asked you to seek approval. The patterns that convinced you to announce everything just to feel like you were moving. Now you are moving. Without noise. Without validation. Without the need to be seen. And that kind of movement, it doesn't shake timelines, it shakes dimensions. Because when you stop telling people what you're doing, you reclaim the power of surprise. And surprise is strategy. Surprise is velocity. Surprise is what happens when your arrival has weight, not because they tracked your steps, but because they never saw it coming. Not because you were hiding, but because you were working. And the result of that kind of work? Unforgettable. You won't need to ask for respect. They'll give it. You won't need to claim space. You'll become it. You won't need to announce the win, because your life will be the victory speech, and no one will forget it, because it will be real, earned, lived, and deeply, silently, indisputably yours. So keep going. Keep walking your path with your head down and your fire up. Keep turning down the volume on the world and turning up the volume on your work. Keep watering the roots while everyone else chases the branches. Because the fruit doesn't grow because you talked about the seed. It grows because you nurtured it in silence. You don't owe the world a play-by-play of your process. You owe yourself results. You owe yourself the satisfaction of arriving at the summit, not with an audience cheering, but with the echo of your own integrity following you up the mountain. That's what matters. Not the noise you make getting there, but the weight of who you became in the process. Let them wonder how you did it. Let them speculate. Let them scroll back and try to piece together the puzzle. They won't find it because you didn't build in public. You built in prayer. You built in pressure. You built in the dark, where no one clapped and no one cared, and you did it anyway. And that's what makes you different. That's what makes your rise inevitable. Not because you shouted, but because you showed up when it was silent. That's the truth of greatness. It doesn't need marketing. It needs momentum. And you, right now, are carrying it. So don't stop. Don't explain. Don't dilute. Don't broadcast what the world hasn't earned the right to see. Build. Build with fire. Build with silence. And when the world finally sees it, they'll call it sudden. They'll call it lucky. They'll call it overnight. Let them, because you'll know the truth. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't lucky. And it damn sure wasn't overnight. It was earned in silence and sealed in sweat. And the result? Unstoppable, unmatched, and yours completely. Never tell anyone what you're doing. Just do it. And when it's done, let your life speak louder than anything you could have ever said. Because silence, when paired with action, becomes the most deafening sound of all. Because that silence, that sacred, powerful, deliberate silence, it's the sound of destiny being written in real time. It's the rhythm of legacy, the hum of mastery, the pulse of a soul no longer distracted, no longer diluted, no longer in need of permission. And that silence grows louder than any scream when it births something the world can't ignore. You see, when you don't tell them, you don't give them room to pollute it. You don't let their fear infect your fire. You don't allow their scarcity to water down your strategy. You don't make room for their small thinking to poison your bold becoming. Because once you speak it, you open the door. And not everyone who hears your plan wants to see it succeed. Not everyone you share your vision with has the capacity to protect it. Not everyone in your circle deserves to be part of your becoming. That's why you keep it to yourself. Not out of secrecy, but out of self-respect. Because when you stop telling them and just start becoming, the transformation becomes bulletproof. Not because there's no resistance, But because there's no leak, you're sealed, fortified, whole. And you don't owe them an explanation for that. You don't owe them access. You don't owe them updates. All you owe is to honor the vision that was given to you, not them. You owe obedience to the inner voice that whispered, "This is the path." You owe allegiance to the discipline that stayed when motivation left. You owe loyalty to the future version of you that's depending on you to stay quiet and keep moving. So let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them underestimate. Let them gossip and guess and wait for updates that never come. Because when you rise, when the thing is built, when the dream is real, you won't need to say a thing. Your life will say it all. And they'll realize you never needed their opinion. You just needed time. And now, time's up. You're here. Not because you announced it, but because you arrived. And when you arrive, not with fireworks, not with fanfare, but with foundation, everything shifts. Not just for you, but for everyone watching. Because what you built in the dark now casts light. Not because you forced them to see it, but because you became it. You didn't beg for belief. You became believable through action. You didn't chase validation. You validated your existence through consistency. You didn't demand respect. You earned it in silence, one uncelebrated moment at a time. And now you walk into rooms that once ignored you, and they go quiet. Not because they remember your words, but because they can't forget your presence. Not because you posted your journey, but because your results now speak volumes fluent in the language of grit, sacrifice, discipline, and patience. You become a walking contradiction to everything the culture celebrates. You didn't go viral. You went deep. You didn't build a following. You built a foundation. You didn't seek attention. You built something so real, so rare, so undeniably true that attention had no choice but to find you. That's the reward of silence. That's the victory of staying low, staying locked in, staying disciplined when no one's watching. Because silence protects you from premature praise. It protects you from counterfeit support. It protects you from the kind of exposure that kills the roots before the tree is strong enough to bear fruit. You didn't need exposure. You needed evolution. And now that you've evolved, you can stand, unshaken, unmoved, unapologetic. And you'll keep building even now, even after the arrival, the same way you started. Quietly, relentlessly, without need, without noise, without asking for eyes on you. Because you finally understand, real ones never announce the shift. They are the shift. And the loudest move you'll ever make is the one no one saw coming.